Hi everyone, welcome back. Recently I decided to reorganize my supply storage and found a couple of very well loved but sadly forgotten palettes I used to use in the beginning of my watercolor journey. When I first started, I went through a lot of videos and blog posts in order to figure out what colors I should buy and what brand I should go for. I eventually decided to buy a cheap Kohinoor set of stackable watercolor cakes and also a few Winsor Newton Cotman watercolor tubes. At the time, I already knew that tubes were cheaper in the long term and also knew that the watercolor cakes were going to be a bit chalky. However, I wanted to have a very cheap set for experimenting that I could use without feeling that I was wasting good paint, and also a slightly better set that I would be excited to use. I know, starting with bad art supplies was probably not the best choice, and I don't actually recommend it to anyone, but although it did put better art supplies at a higher pedestal in my head, it also gave me the freedom to explore the basics without worry. Back then, the last time I had played with paints was probably in my childhood, and mixing colors scared me silly, so I needed to have more expendable art supplies to take the edge off in the beginning. As I was a beginner, I didn't want to break the bank, so alongside the watercolor cakes, getting student-grade watercolors was my best option. Winsor Newton is a brand that is readily available where I live, so I invested in a few tubes. Sadly, I chose the colors I was drawn to, and since I had no knowledge of color theory or how to mix colors, I ended up choosing shades that didn't really work together and that made me feel very overwhelmed. While I kept experimenting and painting with the Kohinoor cakes, the Winsor Newton watercolors were left to the side. I then purchased a set of 24 watercolor tubes from Arteza, which I absolutely loved and that I still own, but the most important part is that I eventually started getting more comfortable with color theory. At the time, I also noticed that the Winsor Newton watercolors were less chalky and easier to re-wet than the Arteza watercolors and cracked a lot less when dried in the pans. So I slowly started buying more colors from the Winsor Newton Cotman range whenever I had the chance, and a few years later I ended up purchasing the last remaining colors and became the proud owner of the full Cotman range. The last thing I needed was a metal palette that could house 40 watercolor half pans. Initially, I couldn't find one that I liked, but eventually figured out that this old chocolate tin I had once received from my mom was actually the perfect fit. And this is how one of my favorite watercolor palettes came to be. Although I am now a lover of color theory and mixing all the shades possible from just the 3 primaries, even the black, I do like to keep a large selection like this on hand, and this range, although a student grade, is by far one of my favorites. In some cases, having these many shades to choose from, now that I understand color mixing, makes it easier to paint certain subjects, although I rarely use more than 3 or 4 colors in a single painting. So this video was basically a dedication to some of the watercolors that have been with me from the beginning. This palette has been refilled plenty of times since it first came to be, and it needed a bit of cleaning before I top up some of the most used colors. The magnets I also used to secure the half pans to the palette had started to fall off and needed to be replaced. As you can see, the 40 half pans fit very snugly in the palette, so instead of replacing the magnets, I swapped them for blue tack. Time will tell if this was a good idea. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like the video and subscribe for more. I will be eventually sharing with you some other old but well-loved palettes in future videos. If this is something you are interested in seeing, be sure to click the notification button so you don't miss any of them when they come out. Thanks so much for watching and see you in the next video!